Hi, I'm Kent Greenfield. I'm a professor of law at Boston College Law School, and I've been teaching at Boston College for about 16 years now. I do constitutional law and corporate law. So this is the $64,000 question in a lot of ways, right? And it's a question that has come up for centuries, if not millennia, right? The tension between social freedom, cultural freedom, political freedom, and individual freedom. And the dilemma always is, to what extent do we, in order to gain social, cultural, political, collective freedom, do we need to constrain individual freedom? Just yesterday I was teaching Lochner in my constitutional law class, and if Lochner is about anything, it's about competing notions of freedom. You have the court saying, look, to ban bakers from working more than 60 hours a week is a constraint on the freedom not only of the employers but on the employees. And Holmes is saying, look, freedom is constrained all the time by things from Sunday laws, which is constrained at the time, constrained businesses from operating on Sundays, to any tax regime or what have you. So this is always the tension. And my point in the book, of course, and often it's an unresolvable tension, and it's something that people are going to fight about for another 1,000 years. But my point is that I think it's a mistake to think about it as a conflict between freedom and authority, or freedom and the state. But it's different kinds of freedom, and there's always got to be a dialogue about what makes the most sense. Here's a simple example. When I commute to work, I am constrained in my freedom that I only can drive on the right side of the road. I don't have the freedom to drive on the left side of the road, even if I really, really wanted to, and even if I thought that, look, I could do so and manage the risk pretty well. Because I'm a pretty good driver, of course, most people think that they are above average as drivers. But in reality, my constraint of driving on the right side of the road makes it possible, makes me free to drive to work. Because if everybody could choose which side of the road they could drive on, it would be much harder to drive to work, and I would be less free than I am now. So this is always the tension, right? When is a constraint on individual freedom, on balance, worth it in order to gain collective freedom? And I think we've always debated about this. So a couple of examples. Think about the requirement that we add access ramps for the disabled. It is in a way, it's a constraint on the freedom of businesses, right? That they have to put in ramps. They can't operate the business as they so choose. But as a cultural and social and political matter, we want disabled people to be free to enter businesses, and we want that even if their market power is insufficient for them to buy that right in the marketplace, right? If they have the market power to do that, then we would say the businesses would have had the market incentives to put in ramps anyway. But they probably don't. But we think that it's better and it's more free and maybe more just, if not free, to put in the access ramps for the disabled. So what does that mean for my book? I think what it means is that often people, I think we fetishize choice more than we should, because we actually are better off with less choice than we think we are. There was even though some of our greatest philosophers talk about choice, there's also a reality that people are sometimes happier with and and take pride in things that we have no choice about. Right? I am very proud of where I grew up, of my family, and I self-identify about things that I have no control over. You know, my sexual orientation, my personality, my and maybe other people don't appreciate my personality, but I tend to like it. So I think one of the things I've learned about this is that we could all be a little more satisfied and with the things that we have no control over. Maybe we can be a little more Zen-like with the things that we can't change, and we'd all be a little happier. And as far as politics go, I think the dichotomy between freedom and authority is a false dichotomy. It's a competition among different visions of freedom. So here's the point about Galarraga and Souter. So I start one of the chapters talking about the incident that happened in Detroit last summer, I guess, where I think is probably the best example of sportsmanship in my lifetime. So Andres Galarraga is this young pitcher for the Tigers. He was a good pitcher, but not a great pitcher. But he was pitching a perfect game, which is quite rare. There have been more people who set foot on the moon than pitched a perfect game in the history of Major League Baseball. It's an extremely rare thing. He was on his last out. A perfect game is everybody gets out. 27 batters up, 27 batters down, no errors, no walks, no nothing. And he got to his last batter. The batter hits a ball to the first base. First baseman pitches it to Galarraga, who's raced over to first base, and he's out. The ball beats the batter by half a step, and it's the kind of call that umpires get right. 99,999 times out of 100,000. But the umpire got it wrong, and it was a huge scandal. Galarraga pitched the next guy and got him out. So actually it was the first 28 out perfect game in the history of Major League Baseball. But the thing about it is Galarraga sort of shrugged and smiled and went along his way and didn't make a big deal out of it. And the umpire, for his part, apologized. He said, "I really screwed this up." And they had a meeting at home plate the next day, and on both sides, it was an example. It was something that it was a way of acting that I would hope my son would act, or I would act in such a circumstance. And the reason why that's important in the book is that after I talk about all the limits on choice, one of the things that I realized was that what we do when others fail is really a matter of our own understanding of the constraints on other people's activities and other people's actions and other people's choices. People make mistakes. It's every one of us is human. Every one of us, one of the things that's true about humans is that we make mistakes. And so you've got to be empathetic about that. The reason I talk about Souter is that when Souter resigned a couple of years ago, President Obama said he wanted to replace Souter with someone who was empathetic, with a judge who was empathetic, and it was a big scandal at the time. The right said, empathy is just another word for result-oriented judging. You can just choose the side that you're more sympathetic to and choose that side. Now, if the conservatives are right about that empathy means sympathy, it's probably right. They're probably right. But I think empathy and the reason why I think Obama was correct to talk about empathy in relation to Souter's retirement was that empathy is more of an intellectual practice, one that I believe Souter engaged in. Empathy means being broad-minded enough to put yourself in the other person's situation and be understanding about the constraints of situation in judging their behavior. And so a couple of examples I used, one of which was about a so-called consensual search on a bus. Greyhound bus traveling from Florida to New York, stopped in the middle of the night in Georgia on the side of the road. 3 police officers get on board. One stands at the rear, one stands at the front, one walks up and down the aisle, asking people whether they would consent to have their bags searched. Of course, people consent, and in this case, they found cocaine in 2 men's duffel bags. And as it turns out, the case is whether this was consensual or not. It gets to the Supreme Court. The court says, yes, this was consent. And Souter writes a dissent saying, look, the reality of the situation is that these people felt coerced, felt forced to consent to the search. And so his empathy, his ability to put himself in the situation of someone who was completely unlike him, in a situation in which he had never been, is a good practice for judges, and it's a good practice for us as individuals. And it takes note of the power of situation, which is one of the key themes in the book. Now, why this has public policy implications and implications for the law is my thinking, pondering in the book that maybe what we need is to take account of the fact that oftentimes the law needs to have rules and guidelines that allow judges and juries to take account of the situation. And not only to let people off the hook, but perhaps to put some people on the hook that should be. And my criticism of Roberts, when he says, look, judges are just like umpires, they call balls and strikes, is that it doesn't take into account the huge contextual obligations of good judging. You have to know the situation. And good law allows people to tell their stories, and good judges and good juries allow those stories to influence their decisions. Thank you. Enjoyed it.